behind the scenes, where I will be showcasing the making of a map part for Warrior Cat's multi-animator project, Lay All Your Love on Me. Before I dive deep into the process of this part, I want to say a warm thank you for everyone who watched the first episode of the behind the scenes. I'm really happy how well the series was received, and a big thank you goes to you all who have given it a shot. Seeing how good the response has been, I hope you all will enjoy hearing about the process as much as you did of the Leopard Star map part This Is Me. This series is still fairly new, so any kind of feedback is highly appreciated. For starters, I will put on the screen now which words and sentences I will be shortening to avoid pronouncing long names constantly over and over again. Because the name of this multi-animator project is quite long, Lay All Your Love on Me, I will be calling this project with the name Lay Love Map. I hope this will give some clarity to all of us as the video progresses and helps me to avoid tongue twisters constantly. The origin story of how I got into this map is very funny, so I thought to share the madness what happened when the Lay Love Map call went up. The map went up exactly at midnight in my time zone. I was about to go to bed, but then my friend, Dal, came crashing down to our DMs. He began to tell me about how Roshards uploaded a map of his favorite song from Mamma Mia and how much he wanted to join it. But because he did not have any animation examples on his channel, he was convinced he wouldn't get into the map at hand. Because I hadn't checked my subscriptions for a few hours, I at first had no clue what he was talking about, until he gave me the link. That was the fateful moment when I got hooked into the hype. When I began to watch the map call, the deadly tiredness I had turned into anxious hype. I was joking to Dal that I would join the map for him, but the more I dove into the script and how the parts were divided throughout the song, I began to feel more and more excited about the idea. I ended up asking primarily for part 20 and put parts 25, 13, 21, 6, and 18 as backup choices. The reason why I put so many backup options for the applying comment was that I wanted to make sure I had a wide variety of options to have even a slim chance to get a part. I also offered to be a backup since that would have been good enough for me as well. So if the younger animators and fresh new faces in the map community want to take anything out of this video, don't settle with just one part as an option. Add 1, 2, or more parts that you also like into your comment or application form. I bet even the host of the map you are applying for appreciates the flexibility when animators show it. Being a backup is always a solid plan. If you happen not to have time for the map at hand at that very moment, backup is perfect for that, as maps can't have enough backups. Out of the bunch, I ended up getting part 6, which was the first part that got my attention when I was looking through the parts. While it wasn't the choice I had placed as the first option, I was still more than happy to take it and do it justice, since getting onto this map was its own kind of thrill of excitement. The script for my part was short and simple. It required the knowledge of what had happened a few parts before mine, but that's the reason why we all read the script by its eternity before starting. Here is my first storyboard. I ended up flipping it around to make the visual narrative of the part flow better with the rest of the map. I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to do with my part, so putting down the storyboard wasn't that challenging in and of itself. Roshards wanted to collect and edit all the storyboards together and come back to us with notes if there was something that needed to be changed in order to achieve a better end product. While the host was working on the first pass of this map, I decided to go ahead and see how my style would translate to her designs she had set for both Dothwing and Tigerheart. With Tigerheart, I had no issues with his design. His design was pretty straightforward, and his characteristics were relatively easy to translate into my style. I more often specialize in designs that consist of stripes rather than spots, so that detail made his design very easy to handle for me. With Tiger Heart's cheek and neck fluff, I decided to make the fur point upwards. Not only did it reflect the design reference I had at the hand of him, but also I felt like the upwards pointing fur could bring out his outgoing, dominant nature. Dogwing, on the other hand, was another story. While her design was easier in the terms of markings, the fact that she was rounder and fluffier brought me a lot of problems. Dogwing was the definition of a character design that drew me out of my comfort zone and said, "Ha! Good luck!" So, what made her so challenging for me? While I love drawing fluffy things, my style consists more of slim cats rather than round, chubby characters. For some reason, it has always been hard for me to add more mass to my characters without feeling like the design isn't balanced by the silhouette. I feel the same when adding excess fur and fluffiness. Adding extra volume around the neck, face, or tail is challenging for me. These things are something I have begun to work on, and hopefully, in a year or two, I will feel much more confident in drawing fluffier and chubbier characters, since I recognize they got their own power dynamic to them that I would love to master. That being said, with Dogwing's design, I wanted to focus on her neck fluff and rounded fluff on her cheeks and top of her head. Originally, I wanted to go for making her ears smaller than I usually do, but I feel like my instinct decided against it. I followed the round theme to her tail tip and made her shorter than Tiger Heart. Despite my struggles, I loved the challenge that Dogwing brought upon me. In the end, I am really satisfied with her. The more I animated and drew her throughout the map part, the more I grew to appreciate her character design. Once the storyboard of the entire map got checked and approved by the host, I received a few notes regarding my part. After reading through the minor notes I had gotten, I did the changes to my storyboard and then I went ahead to sketch out my keyframes. Originally in my part, Tiger Heart was supposed to place a rat down onto the ground during his shot, but that got cut out and moved into an earlier part than before. This meant that the only thing that Tiger Heart had left to do on my part was to smile widely and blush like a love-struck thumb that he is. Another thing that I got to work on was Dogwing's movements from walking straight across the river to walking, crouching, the jump happening outside of the frame, and then she stands up on the final shot after landing. Since the leap across the river doesn't happen on camera, this change was also quite easy to execute. None of these changes were drastic, so it was very easy for me to do those minor tweaks and then continue with sketching out the rest of the frames. One of the reasons why I wanted to make behind the scenes video out of the Leyland map part was because of different animation approach I had with it compared to the Leopard Star map part. If you watched the first behind the scenes video, you would know that with the Leopard Star map part, I drew her body parts onto different layers, judging on whether they moved or not. Leyland map consists of constant movement and lip syncing, whereas the Leopard Star map part was much calmer and less dramatic. Because of this, every single frame included movement in the Leyland part. I'm going to use the first shot as an example of how I approach the process of the movement. Here on top of the playing video, you can see a screenshot of the layers I had on Animate, and how I had divided the timeline into their separate frames. These are only keyframes, and as you can see from the playable video, the keyframes set up where the movement starts and ends. Once I was happy with my keyframes, I began to place breakdowns. The breakdowns helped me to get a better understanding of the flow. Finally, I started to fill in-between frames into the timeline. I animated this map part primarily with 2s, but used 1s and 3s to help the flow whenever it was necessary. This part is animated in 24 frames per second, so as I say I animated this part in 2s, it means that from the timeline, 2 frames were used in a single drawing. As for this example shot, I majorly animated it with 2s and using 1s to smooth out the movement whenever it was necessary. Once I had the frames fully sketched and approved by the host, with the changes I was told to do, I began to get in the cleanup phase, aka line art. The cleanup process went on quite smoothly, but I had a moment with the first shot where I just couldn't bear to watch Duffwing any longer after doing line art for 4 days in a row. I had a few days break between the cleanup, since I got so tired of constantly lining one shot over and over again, which is a good reminder of having breaks during the process, whatever you might be working on. It can also help you to fix visual challenges you may have been stuck with once you see the project with fresh eyes again. The break was much needed, and once I returned to the part, I finished the rest of the cleanup without any further issue. Moving on to the coloring, and all I can really say is that it went very smoothly. I love the color animations, and this time Rorschach had provided official color palettes for both the day and night scenes. In the Leopard Star map part, I did some overlaying on my own, so visually Leopard Star could fit into her own surroundings. But in the Leyland map part, I had those colors already determined for me. The freckles on Duffwing's face were a handful at times, and may have felt repetitive to copy-paste over and over again. But they were fun to work with. I know not many will probably agree with me, but once I had a decent grasp of the freckles, they were quickly over and done with. I ended up making 2 sets of the freckles that I kept copy-pasting at every other frame, just so they wouldn't appear too static. I originally was not going to shade my part, and ultimately ended up sticking with my decision, because I didn't see it necessary for the setting of my part. Night scenes are often quite dark as they are, so adding shading didn't feel like something that could bring any extra value to my part. I had seen a few parts who also had a night scene to play around with the turquoise highlight to add more atmosphere to their parts. I played around with the idea as well, but decided to drop it after gathering opinions from other participants of the map. In the end, I'm quite satisfied that I didn't go ahead with it, since I don't think it would have added any significant value to my part, considering how my part was located at the start of the map. This is the reason why I highly encourage people to communicate with their fellow participants in the map. I'm very thankful and happy to have gotten other opinions regarding my visual dilemma. The map is a product of multiple animators, not just one. So asking for people's opinions regarding any visual ideas you might have that may go beyond the requirements that your part already has is always a good idea, especially if you are hesitating or feeling unsure about it. Of course, ultimately the final word comes from the host or hosts of the map, so make sure to also listen to them and work according to the directions that you have been given. But remember that asking never hurts, so don't be afraid to use your voice every now and then. Then was the time for backgrounds. I was starting to get into doing backgrounds for this map because of all the turns that my part consisted of. While I have done turning and twinning backgrounds multiple times before, I had this odd mental block that made me think these backgrounds in a more complicated way than in the end their process ended up being. So the biggest challenge I had was to make them turn and look natural alongside how the characters were turning around. First things first, I needed to sketch out the backgrounds and make a rough pass for tweening pen. The second and final turn between the second and third shots was quite easy to manage, but the first turn between first and second shots proved to be a challenge. Why? Because where the second turn was just a simple 90-degree turn from Tigerheart's face to Duffwing, the first turn included a lot of area and space to be moved around Duffwing and then zoomed towards Tigerheart. Am I making sense? Because the distance between Duffwing and Tigerheart during the first turn is much wider than in the second turn where they are literally nearby one another. The first turn didn't only include turning but zooming in towards Tigerheart because he was further away from Duffwing. I guess if you have seen the Leyland map part, you probably understand what I mean, so I don't attempt to explaining it for the third time, since I feel like it will get very confusing very quickly. Anyway, once I had the sketch done and tweening finalized, I went ahead and began to line art and color the background part by part. Since the turns that I'm about to do are 3D-ish, with 2D elements, and shift drastically on the frame, this means that I need to layer the 2D elements that I'm going to tween depending on how close to the viewer they are. For example, the first line of trees that are fully visible from both sides move less than the third row of trees behind them, since the first row of trees are closer to the viewer. If I remember correctly, the backgrounds for the Leyland map part included 5 layers worth of earth and trees, plus 2 separate layers for the sky and stars. Out of those 5 earth and tree layers, all of them were moving during the turns. The further away the trees were, they got more motion into their tweening compared to the layers on top. Note that what I'm doing here can be more easily achieved in, for example, Adobe After Effects. After Effects got a 3D camera tool that can help you move 2D layers and achieve a similar trick with less effort of what I'm doing here. The difference between the 3D camera tool that After Effects has and what I'm doing here is that the 3D tool in After Effects determines the look of the camera and makes it look more natural to you automatically, whereas I'm using my brain and manually creating the same effect. I'm aware that Adobe Animate also got some sort of 3D layering effect, but I haven't yet gotten into it. Maybe someday. If others who have used Adobe Animate and have used this 3D feature, feel free to let me know how it works. Is it even worth the effort to get to know and learn about? Moving on from the backgrounds, we got effects to add before we can call this part fully done. The effects that I'm referencing are the blush on the characters' cheeks and highlights in their eyes. The blush that has gotten a lot of praise, and I'm very humbled by, and thank you all so much. That blush is actually done on 2 layers. While I don't have any footage of it, I basically made it so that the first layer has those blush doodles. I turned those doodles into their individual symbols. From Properties window, I added them a blur effect and then lowered their opacity as much as I saw it appropriate. On the second layer, on top of the blush doodles, I did few blush highlight lines just to give the blush more depth? Can I call it depth? Either way, I did the blush on 2 layers, since I didn't want it to appear too flat, if that makes sense. The eye highlights are something I originally tried to do with warmer, more purplish blue than what I ended up using. But I'm glad I took the cool approach with the colder hue of blue, since I feel like it gives the part just the right amount of contrast compared to the warm, soft blush. go! After finishing the blushes and eye highlights, you think I should be done with this part, right? There's actually one more thing I need to complete within the Leyland map part, and that is the very first shot that's actually a transitioning shot from part 5. The reason why I postponed working on it at all while working on the rest of the part was because I wanted the person working on part 5 have time to fully figure out their part and execution of it. Once they seemed more confident of the approach they were going to have for it, I went ahead and took a screenshot of their storyboard and sketched Duckwing and Tigerheart according to the storyboard positions. Here is a speed paint footage of me drawing out this shot, since it was literally a still frame with Tigerheart blurred at the foreground and a sharp zoom in included. I don't have much to say about it, other than I feel like the way I drew Duckwing in this shot finalizes how comfortable I, in the end, got with her design. Having to draw her over and over again throughout the map was actually a very fun experience, despite it being something I have never or barely done before. Even though Duckwing's design made me both love and hate it throughout the process of this, I wouldn't have asked for a better opportunity to get better with drawing fluffy, more round characters. While this map threw me out of my comfort zone, I loved the challenge it presented to me, and I can proudly say I'm really happy with how this part turned out. I feel like this part was also the perfect opportunity for me to work on dramatic and active lip syncing, where the character is constantly moving and isn't remaining still. It was super refreshing and confidence boosting to see what I have learned and understood during the past year about animation and put it all into a good use. Thank you so much to Roshards giving me the opportunity to be part of this beautiful map. Once this map gets fully finished, I will add it at the end card. Please check out Roshards and the rest of the participants that have taken part in this map. They are all wonderful people to work with, and all of them are talented, so please go spread some love to them all. If you haven't seen my part yet, or want to give it a rewatch, it can be found from the end card. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and please stay safe, keep washing your hands, and have a good day or night!